Good afternoon, everyone. We'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Funding Your New Business. We'll get started here momentarily, but we want to give it a little bit of time to get everyone situated. All right, we'll go ahead and get this thing kicked off to be respectful of everyone's time. This will be a 1-hour event, and we have a lot to discuss today as we go through this hour. To get us started, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. These questions will be posted into the featured feed. We want to know what are the demographics, the spread of our audience today. I have started a business within the past 5 years, or I am thinking about starting a new business. We'd like for you to like one of these statements, the one that's most applicable to you. And you can find these questions if you click the live Q&A feed in the upper right of the screen and follow to the featured feed and like one of these questions. To open our event, we have our Director of the Business and Community Development, Larry McManus. Larry?
Thank you, Jarvis. On behalf of Governor Abbott and our Executive Director, Adriana Cruz, we welcome you to the Governor's Small Business Webinar Series, Funding Your New Business. One of the biggest challenges businesses face in starting a business is how to fund it. It is important to know that not every business requires a large investment from the start. However, it is important that the business owner is in a position to keep it going for the long term. Questions that a business owner must consider include, do you have the fund to fund the venture yourself through personal savings? Can you seek funding in the form of a small business loan or a line of credit? Will you have to raise capital? All these questions faced by business owners trying to make sure that their business is sustainable and viable. Today, we have some knowledgeable panelists from the public and private sectors participating on this webinar who can help assist with those questions and more. We thank them for lending their expertise to this webinar, and with you, our audience. Again, thank you for attending this webinar, and we know that you will take away valuable information to use as you build your business for success. Jarvis, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Larry, for those remarks, and thank you for being here as well. And you're absolutely right that we are grateful to have our panelists as well as the audience here today. We want this to be a very conversational event so that a lot of the questions that the audience wants to hear are asked and answered, as well as we get the perspectives of all of our panel members. 1 second. Just want to verify everyone can hear me.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Of course, live event, we're having issues with Microsoft Teams. It wouldn't be a great event if we didn't have issues, right? Give me 1 second. I apologize for this. I'm assuming everyone can still hear me, but the screen has gone blank for me. Give me 1 second. I will proceed as if. So, Michael, could you do me a favor? Could you direct on the next engaging statements?
Sure thing, sir. will post a few more questions that we would like for you to consider and like the ones that are appropriate to you. The next question would be, I plan to use, or I am using, mostly my own money to fund my business. The other option is, I plan to use, or I am using, mostly third-party funding sources to fund my new business. Please consider and like the most appropriate question. As Jarvis rebooting his system, we'll give him just a few more minutes to come back online and continue with our webinar. Thank you for your patience.
All right, I apologize for that. I hope I have gotten it all figured out. Thank you for that, Michael, for filling in my place. So these two questions have been submitted in the featured feed. We hope that you will like those questions. It gives us a better feel about how our audience is divided here today. Let's go forward and introduce our panelists. Today, we are fortunate to have a representative from the Small Business Development Center in North Texas at Tarrant County College, SBDC. We have Rodney Johnson here today. Additionally, hello, Rodney. How are you doing today? Additionally, we have from LFT Fund, Alma Valdez Brown, who will be speaking about CDFIs, the Community Development Financial Institution. And to round it out, we have Chantal Piet from Stroop Club, Stroop Waffles. She's the owner of this company. And again, Teams is not cooperating. I apologize once again. Michael, could you ask the first FAQs that are designed for Mr. Johnson?
Happy to. Okay. Rodney, so would you mind letting us know how important is financial forecasting before you start your business?
Well, Michael, Jarvis, first of all, thank you for inviting me back once again to be a part of this very important series on small businesses. The question that is being posed here is an extremely important question for a business owner. It's as important as it is for your own household. The reason financial forecasting before you start your business is critical is because there's an old saying that says when you run out of money, you run out of business. So if you don't take the time, or if you don't have the discipline to understand what are the costs and what are the future costs associated with your business, and you contrast that against how much money you have, then you really have no indicator of how long you will be able to stay in business, how long you'll be able to sustain your business. And that's very critical. And in fact, it may even go into a decision as to whether or not you should even start the business. Because if you don't have the funds or have not secured the funds or not able to get the funds for any variety of reasons, the very livelihood of the business is at stake. And it's actually almost doomed before you get started. So that's why forecasting is a big word, but all it really means is, am I going to stop before I start my business, am I going to look into the future to see from what I know today, do I have enough capital to sustain my project that I want to get started? And if the answer is no, then you should pause and go and immediately fix that. But if the answer is, I can run my business for 6 months, or I can run my business for a year, or I can run my business for 2 years based off of today's capital at today's dollar values and today's interest rates, then you should proceed. But it should be an intelligent decision. It should not be an uninformed decision.
Thank you, Rodney. This is incredibly helpful, and forecasting forecasting is certainly an important aspect of running and starting a business. And no one starts it in vacuum, and we will have the links and connections to the resources that may help an entrepreneur on their way to plan and forecast how much money they will need, including our experts here on the panel. So we'll continue with the next question: is what role does personal credit rating play in entrepreneur financing before and during the launch of the business?
Well, surprisingly enough, for an entrepreneur starting the business in this season of economics, your personal credit rating is critically important. It gives anyone and everyone who is potentially looking at investing into your business a look as to what is your financial acumen, what is your financial discipline, how have you treated those who have loaned you money before? Are you conscious of being timely with your payments? Are you conscious of overextending yourself with debt? Are you conscious of all of the things that go into your personal rating? We know that there are 3 different credit reporting agencies, and those numbers could be differently, but put them all together, they do tell a very similar story. And those individuals or entities or companies or even family members who are potentially looking at being some level of investor in your business want to know what are your habits. Now, a lot of times we as entrepreneurs want to think that, okay, I will start the business and then I won't need personal business credit going forward. Well, the reality of it is that's just not true. In fact, you will have some bankers to tell you that your credit rating and your personal credit rating will always be a factor in any business lending consideration or situation that they may find themselves in. So somehow or another, it all comes back together. In fact, I heard a banker once say, when he was asked, when does personal credit reporting falls from the banker's application, and that response was it never goes away. So that responsibility for you being prudent before is critical. Here's something that's extremely important. And it's important that you know what your credit rating is before someone tells you what your credit rating is. It's important that you go look up the Equifax or the TransUnion, that you go look up and understand what is on your credit report before you launch the business. Because before you launch the business, you can actually go and do some things. You can actually create a plan of how to mediate some of the issues that you may have, and you can fix those before you get started. But once you start your business and now you go out and you speak to someone and they go and do their research and they discover that you have this issue and that issue, then guess what? The cat is out of the bag. Maybe you can still work your way through it, but now you have a much tougher hill to climb. So it's important that you do understand your credit rating. It's important that you understand credit ratings is critically important before, during, and after the launch of your business. And that credit ratings will always be associated with the financial acumen of the owner and the financial strength of the business. So even though you may be an entrepreneur, it still is a reflection on your business and upon your financial acumen. So you never get away from it. And in fact, the more proactive you are with it, the better you can manage it, because it is something to be managed. It's something to be cultivated. It's something to be cared for. And that responsibility falls completely on you.
Sage advice. Thank you, Rodney. And it looks like Jarvis is back.
I am, and let's see for how long. Again, I apologize everyone for this. As soon as I started talking now, it went blank, but however, we've taken care of everything in our background. So thank you again for that, Rodney. We appreciate that. And I know that we're going to revisit this idea about credit, because I know that Chantal has a unique perspective on that as well.
And it sounds like we
You're on mute.
Jarvis. Good.
As the screen went blank again, I can't see anything or change anything. So we'll proceed with Michael. I apologize again.
Good. Happy to do it, Jarvis. So at this portion, I very briefly wanted to touch on the engagement, on our audience engagement questions. And it sounds like, and this is for the benefit of our panel, it sounds like the entire audience is split about half and half. Some of them are current business owners, and some of them are entrepreneurs thinking starting a business, and it splits about 53 to 47% in favor of current business owners. On other questions, whether they are using their own money, once again, we're almost in dead heat, almost 50-50 between people. Half of our audience is using their own money to fund their business, and the other half is using third party. So I would encourage you to keep that in mind as you provide the questions. One of the most interesting parts of these live webinars is our live Q&A. Our expert panels have graciously agreed to answer your questions as they come in. We would recommend keeping your questions as broad, as relevant to the entire audience as possible. You are welcome to type it into the live Q&A, which is now open. Before you type in your question, please take a look and see whether a similar question was already published in the featured section. If it even remotely sounds like your question, please like it. That will move it up the queue, and we will ask the questions that have the most likes, keeping it as relevant as possible. So once again, please try to keep the questions as broad, as relevant to the conversation as possible. If you do see a similar question, and I would encourage you to check the featured section first. If you see a similar question, please like it, and that will prioritize the question and move it up the queue. So as the live questions are coming in, we will get to them in just a little bit. But before that, I'd like to head over and ask a few questions of Alma. Alma, put you on the hot seat. What are some of the tips you may need to know before going to seek out a loan from a lender or a bank?
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I answer that question, I'd like to just take a quick moment to introduce my organization, because I think that will help to kind of better understand where maybe my answers are coming from. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Alma Valdez-Brown, and I represent LFT Fund. We are a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to help offer microloans and small business loans and even business support services to entrepreneurs who are growing or starting their businesses who may not have an opportunity to go through traditional sources. We have been operating for over 25 years, and I don't remember if I said this, but I've been with the organization for 13 years, and we serve the state of Texas along with other states. In addition to that, we are considered a community development financial institution, a CDFI. And so our organization specializes in providing these financial services to communities that don't have access to those traditional sources, including startup businesses. So I just wanted to share that kind of background information about LFT Fund so that you know, as I answer these questions, you know where my answers are coming from through a CDFI kind of standpoint. So going back to your question about what are the tips that you need to know before coming to seek a loan from either a bank or a lender like LFT Fund or other CDFIs throughout the state, is to be prepared. That's my tip, be prepared. And I have 3 tips. The first is to come prepared with a business plan. Rodney touched about this. It's important to know how much you need. From a lending perspective, we want to be able to help you and understand your needs, but we need to know how much you need. We need to know what your plan is, you know, what is that budget? Number 2 is understanding your financials. If you have a business plan with some financial projections that Rodney mentioned, do you understand them? And what are your startup costs? We like to say, well, what's your best case scenario, right? How much would you need? And then do you have a plan B? What's your minimum? And that would help us to better understand, again, your needs. And then also just have that discussion about the possibility of a loan through the organization, LFT Fund or a bank, whoever you're talking to. And the third is credit. This is very important. Rodney touched on, and I agree 100% with everything he said. Credit is really important, and it's better to come in knowing and having an idea of where your credit rating is, what your credit history looks like. Now, if you don't know, that's fine. You know, I don't want to discourage someone from not reaching out to a lender if you don't know, but it's really a good idea to have that information ready so that you can have a better discussion, and it's you have more outcomes and next steps after your appointment or your meeting with a lender. So those are my tips. It's preparing a business plan, understanding your financials, whether it's the projections or your startup costs, and also reviewing your credit. So those are my tips.
That's terrific, thank you. And there are organizations available, organizations, bodies that may be able to help you pull all of that information together well in advance of going to the bank and asking for a loan. Towards the end of the presentation, we will have resources available. You may also find more resources on our small business page at gov.texas.gov/small business. We will also have that link. And what I would encourage everyone to do is to check out our small business portal. Once again, on the Governor's Office small business page, there's a link to a portal where you'll be able to answer a few very, very simple questions on the state of your business, whether it's just a seedling or a mature business looking to grow. Once you answer those questions that will take you no longer than 15 seconds, the portal will provide you with customized location-based information on the resources that may be available to you, including financial resources. So after that shameless plug for our resources, I want to get back to Alma and her incredibly useful tips, and want to find out what are the requirements for a startup loan.
Great, thank you. So we get asked this a lot. And so in addition to our regular requirements of credit and proving you can take on this new loan and paying us back, and we do need collateral. So in addition to those, for a startup business, we need 3 more requirements. Number 1, you do have to have relevant experience in the business that you're starting. I always kind of joke and say, you know, I love to eat donuts, and maybe one day I'm going to wake up and say, oh, I think I want to open up a donut shop. Well, I'm probably not going to be a good candidate for a loan, only because I don't have relevant experience in that industry. And so it's really important for a lender to understand what is your background, your experience, and that is it relatable to the business that you're starting. So that's really important. So that's 1. Number 2, we do require that you have some skin in the game, some injection into your startup business. So I'm going to go back to the startup cost budget that I mentioned at the beginning. So if I know it's going to cost me X amount to start my business, I, as a startup business owner will need to come in with a minimum of 20% to inject into my startup business. So I have to have some skin in the game. A lender is probably not going to give you 100% financing. They will finance most and part of your business startup or even the expansion of a business, but you do need to come in with some of your own money. So injection is important. And then the third is we do need to have existing income and prove that you have existing outside income to prove that you can pay this loan payment back. And that is for a startup business. I'd like to add that LFT Fund does offer microloans. And so typically for a microloan program, that's a loan 50,000 and below. And we consider you an existing business if you have already operated for 6 months or more. So for that particular loan program, if I've been operating for 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, then I'm considered an existing business through this loan program through LFT Fund. And so, that is one of the biggest differences between a CDFI like LFT Fund and let's say a traditional bank, whereas we will look at that business income if you've been operating for 6 months or more. I do want to add that I really highly encourage if some of you are considering a startup or that you need some financing, just reach out to a lender and have a conversation. We're always happy to talk, and I feel that it's not always going to be a one-time conversation. There may be some follow-up conversations that we'll have because maybe you are ready and maybe you're not, and so we want to help you through that process. So I do encourage you to reach out to a lender like LFT Fund or any other organization. And by the way, I think our contact information will be in one of the slides toward the end. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alma. Okay, it looks like we're getting more and more questions in our featured feed. I encourage you to keep reading through the featured feed. There are some excellent, relevant questions there. Please keep liking them, and we will ask those questions live of our expert panel. Okay, so Chantal, are you ready for the hot seat? You are an incredibly successful, and I do say that without a grain of salt, entrepreneur, an award-winning entrepreneur. So your opinion would be invaluable to our audience, whether they are growing their business or just starting. So, and thank you on behalf of the Governor's Office for stepping in on such a short notice too. So share a little bit about your story. How and why did you start your business?
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Jarvis and Michael, having me here. It is interesting as I'm indeed traveling, but I think we can make this work. It's super cool to be here. Yeah, I think I can give a unique perspective, which I think is not that unique, actually, especially not for my peers in small businesses and the CPG community, mostly consumer packaged goods. I run the Stroop Club. It's a Stroop waffle company. Stroop waffles are cinnamony waffle cookie with caramel in the center. It's basically the national cookie of the Netherlands, which is where I'm from. And within that situation, we literally moved from the Netherlands to the United States 6 years ago with 2 suitcases and the waffle iron. That's how small you can start. And I do believe that many of the business owners are in a similar situation where they come from a different country, where they are immigrants, and where they don't necessarily not even knowing the language, but also not knowing whatever resource there is available to start your company from a law and regulation perspective as from a financial perspective. We started a business because we came to the United States without anything. We didn't know anybody. We didn't have a job lined up. We didn't have a network, no friends when we arrived to Austin. Although I do believe that Texas is the best place to start. So we figured, how can we integrate into this culture fastest and make friends? You do that by bribing them with cookies, is what we found. So that's basically how we started the business. Yeah, and it's fun to share something from your own culture as well. So that's the why and how we got there.
Thank you, inspiring. Well, speaking of finances, the main topic of our conversation today, how did you financially maintain the business in the early stages?
Yeah, so that is a really interesting road, because of also what Rodney mentioned, and Alma actually as well, is how important credit is within the American financial system. If you are coming into the country as an immigrant, though, you are basically non-existing in that financial system, which means you don't have any credit history. There is nothing from your own background in either debts or loans or payments or savings that will transfer to the credit history system in the United States. So we were non-existing. We didn't even have a credit card. So it was very hard for us in the beginning, and it sometimes still is, because we are not eligible for almost any type of funding because of the lack of credit history and credit score. So like Rodney said, I think it is managing your credit is really important. So we started doing that from day one. How we learned all this, by the way, is simply going to as many webinars, as many meetups in whatever the Office of the Government offers you as a webinar, the Small Business Administration, your CPG communities, your hospitality, go everywhere. That's my biggest advice. Listen to everybody's experience. Because again, we had to do it all ourselves. No, even though our credit scores build up very high, it's excellent right now, we would still not be eligible for most loans or funding outside of like capital raising because of the credit history being too short. Fortunately, being from the Netherlands, we have a culture where we are raised of not spending money you don't have. So if you start with the tiniest, smallest amount of money in the business yourself, the only thing we could do is make a project plan and really, really, really look at every single expense you do. And then we created different bank accounts. So we knew that 30% of our cost was production. So every revenue we had, 30% of that we would move to the production bank account. So much for operational expenses. I don't know how much percentage that was, and a little bit for marketing and advertising. So you literally divide everything you get in to all the different parts that need to get out. But it's one of the things I think that Alma said as well. You really need to know how much you need. You really need to know how much does it cost to run your business. And starting that way teaches you a lot on how to forecast, on how to divide, on how to manage your cash flow. And up till this date, we still have bootstrapped. We still have not received any funding until the SBA lowered their requirements in the COVID time, because our business also went very much downhill because we sell to coffee shops all over the United States, which all closed. So fortunately, we got a small loan there. But yeah, if you cannot get any funding because of whatever situation in your personal credit or being an immigrant or not knowing where to go, you just really have to pay attention. Yeah.
Thank you, Chantal. And as a huge fan of Stroop Waffles, period, I'm very happy that you're back up and running. So, yeah. And thank you for your incredible insight and for a plug of all of the resources that may be available. We also understand that entrepreneurs and business owners are incredibly busy. They have an actual business to run. So going to webinars may not be possible, but nevertheless, checking out the resources that may be available online, including, for example, the governor's office, the small business video channel, where we have video recordings of webinars like this, but also small 2 to 3 minute videos answering important questions might be relevant to your business. So with that said, I would like to get to a more exciting portion of our webinar, and that's the live questions from our audience. So even though I may call on one of our experts to answer a specific question, please feel free to jump in, and if you have any relevant actionable advice that may be helpful in answering that question, by all means, please go ahead and answer. For our audience, I encourage you to go to the featured section, take a look, see if there's a question that's relevant to you, like it, move it up the queue, and we will make that question a priority. If you don't see a question, please feel free to ask. We may not be able to get to all of the questions, but we'll certainly try. And keep in mind, make the question as relevant and as broad as possible in order to increase its chances of being featured. So without further ado, one of our most popular questions comes from Nathan. And the question is, due to COVID delays and price increases, our cost to start up was far higher than the forecast was submitted to acquire the SBA loan in the spring. Personal savings and credit to make it open, but it's a big stretch, and we would like to try to get a hold of more cash. Can anyone suggest a good source to obtain additional capital financing when you have no revenue? So this question can easily go to either Rodney or Alma. I'll start with Alma if you don't mind, but anyone is welcome to jump in.
Sure, I'll start off, and if you have anything to add, Rodney, that would be great. I understand the question that Nathan is looking for some additional funding for the startup business, but that revenues are either low or not there. That is something that a lender will look at. And so if there are other sources, maybe there's personal sources of revenue, that is something that would help. And as far as where to go, I would recommend checking with a local organization like LFT Fund or other CDFIs, and even a local bank or a community bank or a credit union, maybe just two, right, to compare to see if there is an option there. But that revenue piece is going to be a challenge, and so it would help if there were an outside source of revenue for the household.
Okay, and if I may add to what Alma has already just beautifully explained. Okay, so for entrepreneurs, the options for finding funding is really not that complicated. I mean, you certainly should look internally, right? Look at your own bank account. Look at what you're willing to invest. As Alma said during her presentation, what skin are you putting in the game? And so sometimes that requires maybe a deeper sacrifice than what you had originally planned, but different times cause you to strategize differently. And so you may have to make an adjustment. Maybe you have to infuse more cash or more from your savings or more from your 401k than what you had originally planned. Always remember that there is also friends and families that you should be able to go to, or maybe not that you should be able to go to, but that you should consider, whether or not it's a fit to ask somebody from your family or from your circle if they wanted to loan you money or invest in your business. Those are certainly options. I think another option that if you have the right product at the right time with the right temperament and the right excitement behind it, crowdfunding and crowdsourcing is always something to be considered. If you have something that other people will actually, gravitate towards, you will find that in our economy, people are really willing, and they're willing to invest, and they're hoping for your success. And they show that by donations, by supporting you through crowdfunding or crowdsourcing. Little do a lot of people know about, if you're in an industry that has some primary suppliers in there, sometimes within those suppliers, they may have solutions and services for their customers to help them with terms and conditions concerning financing of some of their product or their raw materials, just so that they can keep them going or to get them started. So whoever you do a significant amount of business with from a supplier standpoint, you may want to have a conversation with them to ask, what other resources do you have available for new businesses or for startup businesses or for anyone? And that could be, I've been in industries where suppliers were willing to help fund websites, help fund marketing materials, help fund samples, help fund other things that you normally may have to pay for. So looking inside of the specific industry that you're in could be extremely advantageous. It also is great in helping you build your business credit, which is separate from your personal credit. But just realize that you do have options. Some banks would be tempted, might be inclined to give you some support if you're in the right industry, if you have the right financials, if your personal financials are strong enough. You may find, a lending institution willing to do that. You also may find government agencies, there may be some other options out there, some individual investors who are not necessarily family or friends, but they don't mind taking an equity stake in your business, and obviously there's maybe finding a partner. And I'm not saying that, partnership is for everybody and in every industry, but finding somebody who is willing to share the financial load of starting the business. And those certainly are just some off of the top options that I think you should keep in mind as you're contemplating what your next financial strategic move is.
Thank you, Rodney. And actually, the next question coming from Jeffrey is very much in the same vein. Do either you or Alma know of any available loans for businesses in the first 2 years? Do you know of any financial institutions or anyone that loans it? And a follow-up to that, also from Jeffrey, is do you know of any loans specifically geared towards minority business owners or women business owners?
Sure, I'd like to answer that first. So I mentioned that LFT Fund is a community development financial institution. One of the loan programs that we offer is through the SBA. It's called an SBA 7A. It's Community Advantage. And the goal for that particular loan is for lending to minority business owners, women business owners, veteran business owners, and startup business owners. So check. All of the questions that he asked, that would be the ideal loan program for someone who is seeking, and that's 2 years or under. Now, we have regular loans that we offer that are for business owners that are 0 months in business and 6 months in business. We just have to make sure that all the criteria is met. So there are opportunities with different loan programs from different lenders for startup businesses like that.
So one of the things that, and you said 2 years, which I think is a very strategic number. If you have a business that is 2 years old, you may have more options than what you think you may have, because certainly what you should have is at least 8 quarters of financials, or 2 years of financials, or 4 halves of financials, however you want to look at that, right? I mean, but you should have history. And if you have growth within those 2 years, and you're able to demonstrate how you have managed the growth of your business, then you will be able to sit down at a table at a lending institution and have an intelligent conversation about the strength of your business, about the market, about the forecasting. And you couple that with a business plan and what you plan to do with those funds and the revenue that's coming from that, then you have a great recipe for being able to get, future funding for your business, or get a line of credit, or get, whatever. But as an entrepreneur, one of the things we've not talked about much, but I'm gonna slide it in there, because when you're at the 2-year point, the game changes a little bit. Prior to a year, if you have a business less than a year, it's a much taller hill to climb. But that is, you should always be looking for grants. You should always be looking for entrepreneurial developmental programs. I will tell you that there are a lot of institutions who are looking for entrepreneurs to help with their development, their growth and their development. And what they're looking for in return is, have you been committed to the business? Have you been diligent? Are you doing it full time? Have you put skin in the game? Do you have a mark? Do you have a business plan? So forth and so on. And eventually you're going to get a theme that we're kind of pushing through here. But the point is that, there are grants, there are those opportunities that's not only offered by the government, but through some private organizations. Here's something that a lot of people don't know. Grants are not only offered by the United States government. There are a plethora of private institutions, of other large corporations who have very strong grant organizations based on helping minorities, based on helping women, based on helping veterans, based on helping, disadvantaged, or those who live in a hub zone, or those who live in the economically deprived areas. You should be looking for all of those types of programs and advantages for the industry you're in.
Thank you, Rodney. And
I'm sorry, Michael. I just wanted to follow up on what Rodney was saying. This is Jarvis again. I've been here, but don't bother trying to put me on camera. I think that's what's making my screen go blank. Anyways, there it goes. It went blank. Anyways, I just wanted to follow up on that because we get this question daily, multiple times a day, about funding your new business, and especially about grants and loans. And my typical response is that grants are not as common from the government as they would be from private corporations or nonprofits. However, we wouldn't maintain a listing of all of those grants that are not maintained by our office. So I do highly encourage people to do their homework. Look into companies that may be related to your industry. For veterans, the Texas Veterans Commission is a great source for information, especially it's specific to your local community. If you're in Houston, the city of Houston may have programs. Harris County may have programs. If you're in Dallas, the city or county may have programs that us at the state would not maintain. So definitely do your research. I just wanted to add that.
May I add something here as well? Because I see so many questions of the women-founded funding. There is, if you Google, you will get there as well, but there is a couple of ways where you can also check if you would be eligible to get a grant or to get funded. And one of them is beamfounders.org, and it's specifically meant for women-owned businesses. And then there is slowmoney.org, which is also in Texas, also an angel investment fund. And people, I heard Rodney say a lot about crowdfunding. There's a fairly new one. It's called WeFunder, where people invest in your company, and it's literally an investment. So only when you sell, the investors will get some money out of it. And the investors could be me, it could be you, it could be Rodney, it could be your mom, it could be anyone in the United States, basically. So if you would just Google for like angel investor groups or grant groups or women-owned, blah, 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 there's actually a lot out there. Because I just see all these questions coming up constantly. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but WeFunder, beamfounders.org, and slowmoney.org are like good ways to start and just see what they offer and what it does.
Terrific. Thank you. And Jarvis just posted as a reply to the SBA funding a link to fund your business. There are more resources or similar resources available on the Governor's Office Small Business webpage. And once again, I encourage everyone to take a look at the portal that will give you personalized report on all of the resources, or most of the resources, I should say, you would need, including the funding resources that may be available both nationwide, statewide, and in your region and in your area, just after answering just a few quick questions about your business. So great conversation going on the Q&A. We will, I once again encourage you to take a look at the featured feed. I like the questions that are similar to yours, and that will move them up a queue. And speaking of going top of the queue, do you, a question perhaps to Alma, do I need a DNB, a Dun & Bradstreet number to apply for a loan?
You do not. So we've talked about this, and Rodney really went into this. We do require a personal guarantee or personal guarantor, and that would be the owner or the owners of the business. And so LFT Fund uses personal credit of those owners of the company to consider the loan. We do not use the DNB. I think most traditional banks might use both the DNB and the personal credit, but LFT Fund does not, just the personal credit.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. If there's that was a fairly definitive question. So the next question.
I'm sorry, Michael. I'm jumping in here again. I do want to say about the programs that were created following the pandemic, PPP and EIDL. So those programs did require a DUNS number. So many of the SBA programs will have that DUNS requirement. Just want to make that distinction.
Okay, very good. Thank you. The next question is, are there type of businesses that banks won't lend? And I'm sure that the obvious question is anything that is considered illegal, both in the United States or the state of Texas. Let's get that out of the question. But from the banking perspective, are there businesses to which banks just won't lend?
I think that every bank probably has their own, I guess, appetite for who they're going to lend to and who they don't want to lend to. I can say, generally speaking, for lending institutions like LFT Fund, we don't lend to investors. So if I want to invest in a business or if I want to invest in real estate, we're not going to lend to that type of a business owner. We don't lend to someone who is making loans. So we're not going to give you money so that you can go turn around and make another loan. So those are the two types that we don't lend to. But I think that banks might have their individual I guess, listing of who they do or do not. We do lend to all sorts, home-based businesses, startup businesses, people in the services, products, so all industries except those.
And if I may add, and I think Alma raises a great point, and something that I don't think a lot of people know, but certain banks only, not only, but certain banks are niche banks. You have some banks that only operate, in the hotel industry. You have other banks that only operate in the services industry, or banks can be very niche as well. Okay, so if you're in a specific industry, it behooves you to know, what the lending institution is for that industry. I'll give you an example. There's a bank out there who really is aggressive in funding doctors and their private practices, and that's all they prefer to lend to. So that's their niche market. So if you're a doctor in a private practice, you would stand a better chance of going to that particular lending institution than you would going to a general. So, and I know that's kind of above startup, but doctors and medical institutions start every day, all day, all around the country. But it is important to understand who your banker is and what is it that they specialize in, because when you find the right one in the right industry, you will find a much more focused and intense, as well as a quicker, in a lot of cases, process to getting the funds that you need.
Excellent caveat. Thank you, Rob. Speaking of hotel or sometimes niche industries, question from Tim: is financing for a purchase of real estate for an accommodation business handled differently than startup capital financing?
It is, yes. So the obviously the loan amount is going to be probably higher than maybe a small startup business that's needing. The requirement with real estate property that's being purchased probably will include a title company, maybe some appraisals, maybe some surveys and environmental. It really just depends on the lender and the type of loan program that you're using. But so it is different, but is it doable? It absolutely is. It is something that a lender can consider if you're looking at purchasing real estate for that particular purpose. Yes.
And I think the real estate question raises one more point that I want to slide in here. And that is that when you're thinking about starting up, one of the things that, when you're talking about real estate is often one of those things that you would use as collateral to further fund a business. So if you're looking for a loan and you have real estate, you have real assets, understand the impact that may have on your ability, the positive impact that may have on your ability to get funding.
Very, very good. Thank you. I wanted to give everyone a heads up. We're about 4 minutes from closing down. So we have closed the live Q&A because we have quite a few questions still in the queue. Unfortunately, we won't be able to get to all of them because we wanted to, we simply don't have enough time. But please know that we'll have the resources available and standing by to answer your business-specific questions, as well as our future webinars with similar topics. If you haven't already, I would encourage you to sign up for our email distribution list. We never spam. We follow a very strict privacy policy, and we often share resources, relevant, actionable resources that you may be able to use as soon as you learn about them. So one final question that I want to pose to actually all of the panelists. We often hear about crowdfunding. Are you able to share your take on it, and if there are any advantages or disadvantages to crowdfunding your business? Alma, we can start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that crowdfunding is certainly a really good option for some startup businesses. I think Chantel mentioned it, and I think even Rodney mentioned it, I believe, but it is definitely a good option, and it's a good fit for some. For some, it's not. You have to look at the advantages and the disadvantages of it and to see if it works for your startup business. But I do think it's a really good option. Absolutely.
I think that crowdfunding is a very viable option. I don't think it is a guaranteed option that people think that it is, that you have your product and you just want to go crowdfund. But here's one of the benefits of crowdfunding that a lot of time people don't fully expect or contemplate the outcome. And that is, if you put a product out there for crowdfunding and you don't receive crowdfunding resources or support, then oftentimes those resources, you have a target out there, say for instance, you want to raise, X number of dollars, but you put your product out there, all of your marketing collateral, and you don't hit that number, well, you don't get it. But what you do get is you get feedback that your product in its current status may not be the most popular product. It's something indicative of whether or not the market is receptive to the product that you're selling. And so crowdfunding is, if it's nothing else, if it's successful, it's certainly a way to get some funds and move forward. But even if it's unsuccessful, you've been successful at learning something about your product. So crowdfunding serves more of a role than what people give it credit for, and it'll tell you a lot about what you're doing and whether you're on the right path.
Thank you. And before we wrap up, Chantal, any parting words?
Yeah, I think what a lot of people do not realize with the crowdfunding road is that it takes an incredible amount of time to build a campaign. It's not like a post on Facebook. It's actually, you really have to strategically build a campaign, and it's extremely time consuming, and you need good visuals, you need good videos. And there's also crowdfunding platforms that are in niches. So there's the GoFundMe's, the Indiegogo, the Kickstarters, and for different type of services or products, a different type of platform works better than the other. So yeah, it can work or it cannot, and I totally agree with that. It will always be a lesson, but don't underestimate how much work it's going to cost to get there. The only one that stands out, which I mentioned, is the WeFunder platform, which is basically an investment platform and not a crowdfunding in a way that you don't pay in product. So it's a different. I think everyone should research all those options and see if it fits their product, and look at the success stories on those platforms and what they did to get there. That's my advice.
Thank you, Chantal. Jarvis?
Well, again, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for bearing with us as we had a few technical difficulties. This is a very important topic. As I mentioned earlier, we receive inquiries about funding and starting a business. In fact, just last night, my own child came up to me and said her and her friends want to start a business, and the first thing I said was like, where are you going to get the money? So it's something that you have to think about when you're starting a business. Do stay in contact with your local resources. There was a lot of questions about minority, veteran, people with disability. There are programs out there, even if they're not at the state level. So stay connected with your government entities, state, local, federal, and thank you for being here. At this time, to close out the event, we'll hand over to Larry McManus.
Thank you, Jarvis. And Jarvis will follow up with all the attendees. There will be an email that will go to you with information. Also asking you to complete a response to a survey, and also a link to this webinar if you'd like to watch it again. We do apologize for the technical difficulties. However, on behalf of the governor, we'd like to thank our panelists, Rodney, Alma, and Chantal, for participating. That was great information. We really do appreciate that. Please contact us, contact your resources, and you are welcome to reach out to us at any time. And we will close this webinar and hope to see you the next time. Thank you for attending.